Welcome back to Iowa in Focus. We're here on the campus of Cornell College with Professor Hans Hassell. And if we could just first start with, obviously a terrorist attack has a lot of huge impacts in a lot of different ways. What kind of impact does it have, though, on a population who's trying to figure out who their next president's going to be and what some of their characteristics are going to be?
This is very interesting. There are some fascinating studies that came out right around 9/11 in political science, looking at what's the effect of threats and other sorts of fear-engaging kind of rhetoric. What's the effect of that sort of thing on your individual's policy preferences and opinions and voting? And actually what they found is that if you are facing a threat, people are actually generally more likely to vote conservatively. These threats don't necessarily have to be actual threats on your life, but they can be perceptions of threat or a variety of other things. And so this may actually have an influence in that it turns the talk of issues and debate to an issue that perhaps favors the Republican Party more, because when this happens, people are more likely to think about things about security rather than and their own personal welfare than kind of reaching out to others, which is kind of the key democratic principles.
Within the mindset of a campaign, then, how much are they aware of that kind of thing, where they know that your voter base is in a very different mindset now?
I think they're definitely very aware of that. I mean, the campaigns and parties have issues that they would prefer to talk about, and this foreign policy security is very much a Republican issue and has been a long time. If you look at polls that have asked the American public which party do you trust more on these types of issues, it's generally been the Republican Party for the past 3 decades that has been stronger on these particular issues.
2016 has been unique in a lot of different ways. Is it unique in this sense because one of your leading Democrat is the former Secretary of State? So to the extent that this might be a conservative issue and you might automatically go to Republicans, does she bring kind of a power that most Democrats may not, because she has this international relations experience?
Yeah, one of the hardest things for candidates to do, or the candidates who are running for president to do, is to show some sort of foreign policy expertise. You don't get that as a senator unless you're on the Foreign Relations Committee, and then only in a limited amount. You don't get this at all at a governor, and you get these instances of Sarah Palin saying, "Or I can see Russia from my," or not actually saying it, but be that the perception of what she said, and other candidates trying to kind of put together a foreign policy perspective, but not really having that expertise. And this is something that perhaps is different about her than it is about other Democrats that might be beneficial to her.
What does this mean on the Republican side now, where you have 3 candidates who may not be at the top, but at least have been performing well, who aren't politicians at all? Mm-hmm. And so to the extent that you might run to the conservative values, now you're running to 3 people who don't come from the governmental structure in any capacity.
Yes, so I think that voters are trying to create a narrative about these candidates, and this might be a struggle for them as they try to say, where does Ben Carson and Donald Trump fit in this? Carly Fiorina, where do they fit in this in their expertise? Do I trust them with the ability to deal with international affairs and to deal with other heads of state? You have the interaction between Carly Fiorina and Donald Trump about meeting Putin in the green room of 60 Minutes. Well, what's actually how do they actually have the expertise and the ability to deal with these individuals that are leading other countries, and are they going to set up the United States to be successful in the international arena?
On that note, because Russian citizens have been attacked, and now French citizens and some Americans, and this terror against nation states is happening now, it seems to be at least bringing the United States and Russia and President Obama and Vladimir Putin closer together. What does that mean now for a group of candidates who, for a while it looked like Putin was trying to distance himself from the Americans, and now it seems like they can almost work together to defeat this common enemy?
I mean, you hope that this ends up being something like World War II, where you had the Soviets and the United States who had very different opinions joined together to defeat a worse threat. You hope that that's kind of what's going to motivate here. But you also hope at the same time that it doesn't put the United States in a place where we are setting ourselves up to help entities or countries that may be antagonistic towards us in the future. Right? Joining together to defeat a common enemy is great, and we should definitely work to try to try to prevent harm from coming to us, but we also need to think about the long-term implications of this as well, right? Are we going to end up arming individuals who are then going to turn against us after this common enemy is defeated?
The added and kind of domestic issue to these international affairs is Syrian refugees now, and the United States pledging to take more Syrian refugees. Now, the split seems to be almost directly down party lines. Did you expect it to be that much Democrat and Republican split on this kind of issue?
I think that I'm not surprised. Politics in the United States now is very polarized, and so if you have a Democratic president who's taken a stance on one issue, Republicans have an incentive to take the opposite stance and to claim that that president is misleading the country. Right? This is just kind of standard oppositional politics, for polarized politics. So that when the president takes a stance on an issue, what you see is everybody else reacting to him and reacting to that particular stance. And so I think that understanding why Republicans are doing this is not hard. Right? We live in a country that's very polarized, and we take signals from the president. If I'm not of the same party as the president, I should take a stance opposite of the president. Very interesting. Back in the early 2000s. There was George W. Bush floated an idea about NASA beefing up to go to Mars. And before that trial balloon was floated, if you were to poll Democrats and Republicans, they would be split 50-50 on the issue, right? About 50% of Republicans supported it, 50% of Republicans were opposed to it. Same thing with Democrats. That trial balloon was floated. They did a poll about a week later. Right, 90% of Republicans favored going to Mars, and 10% of Democrats favored to go to Mars. Right? So people take these cues from the president and then make their decisions accordingly on that basis.
Is it tough though for Republicans, because back after 2001 you saw George Bush say that we're not going to roll back business student visas and tourist visas after the 9/11 hijackers came to the United States primarily by those means. Is there any sense of historical, of breaking from what had been the norm back then in taking the stance that a lot of the Republicans are now on Syrian refugees, or is this a completely different world, completely different situation?
I think that we're talking 15 years later essentially, and I think that this is a different. 15 years in politics is a long time, and you're dealing with a whole new set of voters, a whole new set of Back in 2001, you didn't have the concept of the Tea Party and these groups that had mobilized in the same way, and so I think that we're dealing with an entirely different political situation, and so. They're appealing to different constituencies than they were 15 years ago.
Over the course of campaigns, issues kind of come and go, and things that we thought were a big deal 4 months ago, we're not even talking about anymore now. Is this something that has lasting power, though, for a whole year? Or certainly through the Iowa caucuses, and then through some of the early states, and then through November 2016?
I don't think this is an issue that's going to go away. Can it be surpassed by other issues? Sure. And I think that's really the question is there another issue or another media event that comes up that then replaces this particular issue that has been kind of the highlight of the focus in the last week or so? And I think that this will definitely shape the campaign. Whether or not it will have a kind of a lasting impact, that's to be seen. But I think it definitely creates a narrative that voters consider and kind of use to formulate judgments, which then cause subsequent judgments and create this the kind of the narrative that goes around the campaigns and the candidates. So it's probably not going to go away quickly, but to say that this is going to last a full year, that's kind of hard to say. It will definitely be something that I think will be here through the Iowa caucus. It will definitely still be on people's minds in 3 or 4 months from now.